Hello and welcome to a new episode of Adobe Creative Cloud TV. My name is Terry White, and in this episode we get to see how to take advantage of the Adobe Creative Cloud photography plan. Of course, as a photographer, you recognize the industry standard tools, Photoshop and Lightroom. Well, now you can take advantage of them in the photography plan along with mobile and cloud workflows as well. So let's take a look at how this all works together, whether you're using Lightroom on your desktop or Lightroom on a mobile device or even in a web browser. We'll see how we can take advantage of our photography no matter where we happen to be. So with that said, the first thing you might want to do is get started is bringing in your photos. So we're going to talk about a few ways to do that. I know many of you may be coming over from programs like Aperture and iPhoto. So let's start there. If you're coming over from either one of those, you go up to your file menu, come down, and under the plugin extras, you'll notice that there is an import from Aperture Library and an import from iPhoto Library built right in. So that means that if you have existing libraries where you've organized and managed photos, you can go ahead and bring those right into Lightroom as is. I have an image or a set of images that are in a folder. So I can go ahead and pull that folder right on top of Lightroom, and Lightroom will start the import process. Now, since those images are already on my hard drive, Lightroom's just going to add them in place, meaning it's not going to move them or do anything to them. I can also choose which images to import or which images not to import. So if I see some that, I know I have better versions of them, I can choose not to import the ones that are just okay. Another new option here is the ability to add to a collection, and of course the build smart previews from the previous version. So I can add these directly to an existing collection, or better yet, a new collection that I can create right here on the fly. So we'll call this Adobe Play, and I'm going to add it to a collection set, as well as go ahead right off the bat and sync it with Lightroom Mobile. So what will happen when I do that, when I do this import, is it will add the images right into Lightroom in place, and it will begin to build the smart previews, and then once it's done, it will add them to that new collection that I just told it to build. So it will start the import process, and again, since it's just adding them in place, it happens very quickly. Now the build smart previews process happens right after, and of course that's a background process. So I could begin the work that I want to do without having to wait for that to finish. And also we'll see that the collection has been added. It's empty at the moment because it's waiting for the smart preview process to finish. But again, I don't have to wait. I can continue working on the images that I want to work on. So we'll come back to that in a second. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the next thing, and that is HDR, high dynamic range. Now typically, to process HDR images, this is something that you would do outside of Lightroom. You would maybe bring the images in that you shot, bracket it, and then of course you would then have to select them and merge them to HDR either in Photoshop or with some plugin or something else. Well, now this technology is built right in. So I can select these images, and I can just right click, and I can then say photo merge, brand new capability, or just Control H from my keyboard. When I say photo merge to HDR, it will create a preview taking my overexposed, underexposed, and my medium exposed image and create a brand new high dynamic range preview of those images. I also have the ability to auto align the images. Perhaps I may not have been on a tripod, it might have been a slight movement. It will auto align, it will auto tone, and if there was something moving inside the image, like cars in this case, under this overpass, I have the ability to de-ghost them as well. So once I'm happy with the preview, I can go ahead and just simply say merge, and the merge will begin to happen. And again, that's also a background process, but this one's going to happen pretty quick, so we'll just go ahead and wait a second for it. Now, what it's done is it's taken those 3 raw files and created a brand new high dynamic range raw file from them. So taking advantage of all 3 exposures to create a very high dynamic range image from them. At this point, I can take it over to the develop module. I can work on these images. I can do whatever I want with this HDR that I would typically do once it had been returned from Photoshop. So if I want to make the blacks a little stronger, if I want to either increase or decrease the exposure, I can do that. If I'm clipping shadows, I can go ahead and adjust for that right here on the histogram. And of course, since it is a landscape, I can bump up the clarity and maybe even bump up the saturation a little bit to get this image, again, doing these non-destructive edits just the way I want. Okay, so with that said, I can go back. And while we're on that topic, let's move on to the next folder that I want to work on here, where I've got some images from Switzerland. And these were, of course, taken, one after another as I slightly turned the camera to create a panoramic image. Here's the final panel here, but just to show you how I built that, I'm just going to go ahead and make my selection of all 10 images in this case. And it doesn't need to be 10. It could be 2, it could be 5, it could be 15. It could be as many images as it takes to make your panoramic. And once I've done this, I can then go in, right-click once again, and photo merge or Control M to merge to panorama. So just like before, it will go ahead and build the preview, looking at each one of those raw files to do that. Now we do have to wait for the preview, but once it's done building the preview and we want to go ahead and stitch those panels together, we don't have to wait for it to finish stitching before we go on to the next thing. So we do have background processing for the final processes, and what's even cool about that, whether you're doing HDR or panos, is that once you start the process of merging, you can then go on to the next set. So while it was merging the HDR, I could do another HDR or I could do another pano, and it will just keep building those in the background. So it looks like it's done building the preview. It looks really good. I had a choice for auto select the projection, whether it's spherical, maybe I'm doing a 360 degree pano, a cylindrical, or perspective. And of course, perspective is going to look best on this kind of photo. I could let Lightroom decide, and maybe looking at the images, it can do its best projection. I also have the option to auto crop. So this is how much stuff was left over, and it just auto cropped it for me. And then of course I can now begin the merge process. Now that merging, again, is happening in the background. I don't have to wait for it. As a matter of fact, let's go to that Adobe Play collection that we started earlier. So these images have all been added to this collection. They've all been synced to Lightroom Mobile in the cloud. And I even have the option in the upper right-hand corner, if I want to share this collection or share this gallery publicly, I can make it public right here, and it will create a unique link to this gallery that I can share. So for example, let's go ahead and do that. We'll generate the URL, and once it's made that URL, I can go to it at any time, or I can share it at any time. And so that's the custom link that it just made. Now, speaking of going to the web, and speaking of bringing in images, there's another way we can do this as well. So let's head over to my browser. And in my browser, especially if I refresh the page here, we'll see the new Adobe Play collection. We'll see the existing collections that I already had. And what's new here is even in the web version at lightroom.adobe.com, you'll have the ability to create a new collection right here in the web. So even if you're away from your computer, away from your mobile devices, you're on another computer that didn't have Lightroom, you have the ability to just log in with a web browser with your Adobe ID, create a collection, and more importantly, you'll notice for each collection, I have the ability to add images to that collection. So if there's a particular image that I want to put in that collection, I can go ahead and select that image. Even though this particular one's not part of Adobe Play, I can go ahead and open it. It will upload that image and add it in. So it says one new image files uploaded. I can dismiss that. I can take a look at Adobe Play. I can see the new image that's been added. But more importantly, when I get back to my desk or when I look at this on my mobile devices, that new image will be back on my computer as well. So even if I were away on a different computer, someone else's computer, a public computer, and I want to add images to my photo collections in Lightroom, I can do that anywhere. So it's really more than just Lightroom Mobile, it's Lightroom everywhere. So with that said, let's head back to Lightroom on the desktop. And as we can see, there's the new image that it downloaded. It's still creating the panorama in the background, but we can just keep rocking right along. Now, speaking of performance, one of the big things is performance enhancements here in the develop module. So for example, I want to work on this image of Jesse, and I'm going to take him over into the develop module. But before I do that, I want to point out a couple of things. Let's go up to the preferences here. And in the preferences, you'll notice a new performance tab. And that performance tab will look to see, or Lightroom will look to see, if you have a compatible video card that has a GPU, a graphics processing unit on it that we can take advantage of. So even on computers that are 4 or 5 years old, we can take advantage of the GPU and accelerate Camera Raw or the develop module to make everything faster, or in some cases thousands of percents faster than it was without the GPU. Now, of course, if you don't have a GPU that we can take advantage of, we'll just continue to do it the way we always did, using the CPU to work on those images and develop. The other thing I want to point out, since we're talking a little bit about performance, and especially on newer computers, if we go to our catalog settings, you'll notice that there is a new standard preview setting called Auto. And what this allows me to do, it's on by default for your new collections, but you may want to turn it on for an existing collection, is before we would build a standard preview based on a specific size. Now we look at the display capabilities that Lightroom is running on. So if you're running it on a 4K display, a new iMac 5K Retina display, any high DPI display, we'll build the previews accordingly for the display you're running on. Okay, so we've done all the performance things. Now let's talk about, or we talked about performance, now let's go ahead and actually take advantage of performance. I'm going to take this image over into the develop module. So I just hit the letter D on my keyboard, where I can do all my non-destructive edits, just like we started on the HDR. So I can bring the shadows up a little bit in this image. I can also adjust the overall exposure if I want. I can adjust the vibrance if I want. I can go ahead and do the sharpening. I can just kind of get this image looking the way I want, even with the tone curve, which I like to play with. I like the medium in most cases for people. And I can continue working on this. I can even add vignettes and other things while I'm working on this. But I get to a point to where I may want to do something in Photoshop. And one more thing I want to do here is I want to crop this image just a hair. Let's bring that down. Okay. So now that I got the image, again, all these non-destructive edits done here in Lightroom, I actually want to work on this image and do a couple of things that Lightroom just can't do. I can do them easier or do them, period, in Photoshop. So with that said, I'm going to, again, right-click on this. I could use a keyboard shortcut, but I'm going to say Command E for that matter. I can say Edit in Adobe Photoshop CC 2014. And what that will do is it will open this image up in Photoshop and let me work on it any way that I want. So again, I can create layers to work non-destructively. I can create smart objects to work non-destructively. But in this case, there are some retouching things that I want to do that I'm pretty sure that I want them, so I don't have to worry about it being non-destructive. And also keep in mind that we aren't editing the actual raw file. What it did was create a Photoshop document for me to work on, so if I ever do need to get back, I have the original raw file to work on. So with that said, let me use my clone stamp tool, and let's make my brush a little smaller, and I'm just going to go ahead and clone away some of the flyaway hair here, just a little bit. All right, so we'll just clone some of the background onto that hair, just kind of smoothing them out, giving Jesse a little bit of a touch up here, and taking care of the hair. The other thing that kind of drives me crazy, especially with fashion images like this, is when we see wrinkles on the side. I know they're natural, but it just would look better if we could take care of that. So let's go up to our filter menu. Let's come down to liquify. And with liquify, we're just going to go ahead and we can make that window bigger if we want. And we can zoom in if we want. And what I'd love to do is just take care or just nudge over some of the wrinkles here in the sweater. Just kind of a pet peeve of mine when I'm looking at fashion images, and also I'm sure the client, if we were advertising the sweater, would love that sweater to look like it's fitting a little bit better. Now, of course, I can get into a little bit more detail work here if I wanted to freeze that pink so it didn't move. And just go ahead and use the freeze mask and then go back to my warp tool and know that I'm not moving the pink in that case, or at least not moving much of it. All right, so there we are. We'll click OK on that. We've got our adjustment there, and I do see I did move a little bit of the pink, but no problem, because we do have the history brush, and the history brush will let me go ahead and just bring that back in. All right, perfect. So now we'll save this, we'll close it, we'll head back to Lightroom, where Lightroom now has both the original file in this collection and it has the new PSD. And of course, I don't need both of them in the collection, so I can just go ahead and remove the original. And now we have the new edited version in this collection that we may be sharing with others. Now, with that said, what if I want to start to identify some of the folks inside this collection? We have a new capability. We have face recognition here in Lightroom. So I'm going to go ahead and just simply switch views. We'll go to our new people view, which is the letter O on your keyboard. That will quickly start looking through your photos. It's detecting faces in the film strip. And again, this is a background process. You don't have to wait for it. And as it's identifying people, or faces, it's starting to bring them up. Now, if it recognizes what it thinks is the same person, it will start to stack those photos together on each other. So for example, you'll see a number 4 here, a number 2 here, a number 4, 3, 2. That means that there are 4 photos here that it thinks are the same person. And in this case, it's correct. Now, even though it's identified faces, it doesn't know who those people are. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on one of the faces here, and I'm going to identify who this is. This is Mary. And as soon as I lock that in, it will add Mary to the named people, and then, of course, prompt me to name the next one. Of course, we know this is Jesse. We just worked on him. Okay, great. Now, if I wait a few moments, it will start asking me, like in this case, hey, is this Mary also? Meaning it started to look for people and identify if it's the same person. I can say yes. It wasn't sure, it was close, but it just wasn't sure. Now on these, it didn't guess at all. So I can just go ahead and either add the name one by one or select them both and drag them up to Mary, and that way I've identified those folks as Mary as well. Same thing on this one on Jesse, it just didn't get it. I can go ahead and drag that one up. And then I start noticing some people that aren't a part of this campaign or aren't a part of these bands. So what's going on here? Let's double click, and I can see that it's so good that it started recognizing faces on the book cover. So those are face regions I don't need. I can go ahead and just simply delete them off that image, and therefore they will be removed from my people view. So that is how, and of course we know this is Candace. We just added that one as well. All right, so that is how the face recognition works. I can keep identifying people. I can keep dragging people onto the faces I've already identified to identify them. But let's really put this to the test. Now we know these are coming from the Adobe Play collection. What I'd love to do is add a new image to that Adobe Play collection and see if it can identify it. So let me bring up my camera phone here, my smartphone. And let's just bring it up so you guys can see it. There it is. And we'll go ahead and grab the camera app. And of course, it's identifying faces on the camera, or on the screen. I want to turn this around and take a picture, or take a selfie. Now, of course, that new selfie is on the camera roll. So I'm going to go ahead and bounce out of my camera app, and I'm just going to go ahead and launch Lightroom on my iPhone. So there's Lightroom Mobile. And now that one, or there's a new collection coming in, and that one photo automatically got added to my, if we scroll down here, automatically got added to my on-the-go collection because I've got this collection set. Here, let's change the sort order of this. I've got this collection set to automatically add new images. But what I'd love to do is move this one to that other collection. So let's move it to the Adobe Play collection like so. So now that we've moved it to the Adobe Play collection, Lightroom will begin syncing that back down to the desktop, hopefully. There it is. It's been added to the bottom. And once that image comes in, and I can see it happening in the background already. Here, let's put the phone away for a second and let's scroll down, and I can see that it's already identified me. So you just witnessed taking a photo away from the computer on my iPhone, adding it to Lightroom Mobile, adding it to the right collection, having it sync the full resolution of that photo back to my computer, and since it's in a collection and I happen to be on the people view, it's identified that face in the photo. So I can go in and say, yep, I know that guy. That's Terry White. And now Terry White's been added to the named people or named persons. So that is how the face recognition works, and that is also how the Lightroom Mobile works going the other way, taking an image from your phone or from your device and back to the computer. Speaking of Lightroom Mobile on devices, you may know that we, of course, work on iPhone and iPad. We had a few months ago come out with our Android version for phone, and today I'm happy to announce that Android versions for tablet should also be available by the time you watch this. So with that said, we're working as quickly as we can to get our apps on as many devices as you want them on as quickly as possible. So let's take a look at our next thing for now let's get into the storytelling part. I'm going to switch to a different collection here. I'm going to switch to my landscapes portfolio. And in my landscapes portfolio, which is also synced to Lightroom Mobile, there are no people found in it. So let's go back to the grid view. What I love to do here is do a slideshow with these images. Now, slideshows aren't new in Lightroom. They've been here for years. But what is new is we've done a lot of work around the playback and adding music and things that we can do there. So let's take a look at what's new. First and foremost, even though we had music before, now you can add songs. You can add multiple songs. And so, for example, I can use either MP3s or AACs, in this case M4As. So many acronyms. That's what this music sounds like, so we'll go ahead and add that one. And as you can see, it just added it right along with the existing song, which in this case I don't need. Now, of course, in the slideshow mode, we have manual, which means it will just play the slides one after another on a timed interval. Or we can do automatic, where it syncs the slides to the music and now to the beat of the music as well. If you have videos in your slideshow, you can balance what's going to be more important, the audio from the video or the audio from the music. And one of my favorite new things, the brand new pan and zoom. So let's take a look at how this all looks together. I'm going to go ahead and just preview this. Let's just play it right here, and it will build a slideshow and play it full screen. So that's the pan and zoom happening, and the slides going to the beat of the music. So pretty cool to be able to do this now with Lightroom built right in without having to go to another application just to animate the images. All right, we're going to escape out of that. And of course, the slideshows that you build can be exported as videos. So if you want to use them somewhere else, use them on your website as a slideshow, you can do that. And it can even be exported as a PDF. So that is the storytelling from the Lightroom perspective. But I've got a new way to tell stories now. And I'm going to introduce you to telling stories using Adobe Slate. So let's set the stage here. We've worked on our images. We've got everything all set. I'm just firing up my iPad here so you can see it. And on the iPad, I'm going to go in and go to my Adobe folder. And on my Adobe folder, I've got a new application, fairly new, called Adobe Slate. So when I launch Adobe Slate, it will ask me to sign in with my Adobe ID. So let me go ahead and do that. And once I'm signed in, it will allow me to look at stories that others have created to maybe get some inspiration, or go ahead and just look at my existing projects, or of course, just the big button right at the top there, create a new story. So when I say create a new story, what's really cool about this is I can, of course, add a title, and let's call it World travel. And I can add a subtitle by Terry White. But more importantly, of course, I want to tell this story with my images. So when I tap the plus sign to add a photo, you'll notice that not only can I get photos from my device, from my Creative Cloud Files folder, even from Dropbox, but my photos live in Lightroom. So here I have access to my same Lightroom collections, including the Adobe Play one we just added. So if I want to get images from there, I could, but I'm going to scroll down to my travel portfolio, and from here I can go in and grab any images that I want to use as the background for my world travel show. Now I can also change the theme of what I want this to look like. So for example, I think it's on crisp. I can go to vintage. I can go to nightcap. I can go to whimsy. I can go to Bruce. I can go to chic. And Teresa, Baldwin, or Wesley. Let's see which one I like best. Ooh, Wesley looks kind of cool. How about Baldwin? Baldwin looks very official. I think I'll stick with crisp. I like the nice thin type on that one. So at that point, I've got my cover slide in. I've got my main image in, and now it's asking me, well, what do you want next? Well, I want to add a little text, and we can call these, either you can add stories or you can call them super captions. And so I have the great good fortune of being able to travel the world and see the beauty that it holds. Okay, so I won't be doing a lot of typing during this demo, but you get the idea. Now the next thing is I can go ahead and add in whatever I want the next thing to be. Another photo, more text, a link that people can actually tap on and view, or maybe a photo grid. So in this case, I want to add maybe some images some images of people. Let's go ahead and do that, even though it's a statue. How many more people shots in there? I don't think so. I think those. And at that point, I want to say that I'm done. And now it's automatically added those images in. If I want to change anything about that, I can edit the grid. I can even say that I want to move that image in the middle of the grid and say that I'm done. And it will create the new taller grid using the tall image. So at this point, it's just on and to adding more things. So let's add one more photo here. And I want to add a photo this time. One that I recently took while I was in Amsterdam, and now I can tell it to add that photo, and I can tell it how to add it. Add it as an inline image, fill the screen with it, or one of my favorite ways is add it as a window. So there'll be a scrolling window above it. And we'll just say that we have some text that we want to add after this. A recent trip to Amsterdam. I was able to capture this shot right after sunset. Okay, and we'll add one more image and we'll call it good. Let's add one more photo and we'll add this beautiful shot from San Francisco. And we'll just leave that one as an inline. Now, of course, I can keep, as you get the idea here, I can just keep going. I've told my story so far with several images, some text, and it's looking great the way it looks here. But let's go ahead and preview it. This is the way it would look if anyone else were looking at it. So I can go ahead and scroll. They get to see the images. They get to see read the text. Here's that scrolling window effect I like, where the image stays static in the background and we have a scroll effect over it. And of course, the images keep going, and then it goes down to the title or the ending credits. So at that point, if I like the preview, now I have the ability to share this story. I can make it public so it shows up in the gallery to inspire others, or I keep it private. I can put it in whatever category I want. I can have the author credits shown. So let me go ahead and put my author credit in. And notice it's got the clipboard selected. So it's just going to copy a link to the clipboard once it publishes this, and I can send that link to anyone and they can look at this story in their web browser. So they'll be able to see this, play with it, share it with others if they want, and This costs me nothing. It's all part of being a Creative Cloud member, and the app, of course, is free to download. It's an iPad app. Go grab Adobe Slate. So what you've seen here, in summary, is you've seen a workflow going from bringing our images in, whether we get them from our hard drive or camera, a memory card, other applications such as Aperture and iPhoto, working with those images non-destructively in Lightroom, creating HDRs, creating panos. If we need more, round-tripping them over to Photoshop and back. Of course, taking advantage of Lightroom Mobile to not only take images that we had on our desktop and make them available to others to view on the web, but also for us to view and work on our mobile devices, whether you're on iOS or Android. I can not only review the images, I can mark the pics, rejects, I can even do some non-destructive edits that sync back to the desktop. And more importantly, as I'm out capturing new images, maybe on my iPhone, I can have those images sync in their full resolution back to the desktop so that they're there waiting for me when I get back home. And last but not least, the ability to now tell my story in multiple ways, whether I'm using the slideshow module in Lightroom, whether I'm creating new web galleries with the new web galleries in Lightroom CC, or more importantly, whether I'm telling it with new ways on my iPad, such as using Adobe Slate or Adobe Voice to tell a visual story that I can even narrate if I'm using Adobe Voice. So, great new capabilities. Whether you're brand new to the Creative Cloud photography plan, or you've been an existing member, or you're thinking about becoming a member, you can all take advantage of this today by simply heading to adobe.com and getting started. So with that said, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.